Hello. Hello, the nobody here. Um, so today should be a quickish stream. I just wanted to do a little. I just wanted to do a fun little thing. If anyone, I'll keep saying this throughout it, but if anyone joins, if anyone happens to join, I'm open to answering questions as someone who is currently in school to be a therapist. I've done all of like the basic like academic work and stuff. All I need is like the field experience. So all I need to do is like get experience, like getting supervised and doing my internship and stuff like that. But other than that, like other than passing like the major exams and stuff like that, I've like got all the book work down, I think. So take everything I say with a huge grain of salt. I could be wrong about a lot of things, because like I said, I'm not a therapist. But I'm going to be. I'm definitely less knowledgeable than a therapist, and I'm definitely more knowledgeable than someone who is not at all a therapist. So once again, if anyone wants to ask me anything in chat related to like psychology or maybe like a situation you're in, we could like treat this like one of those old school like radio shows where they like people like call in and ask questions and stuff. Except it won't be a call in; it'll just be people asking me questions over text. So if you got a question, just throw it in chat. And yeah, so we're just gonna get started with this because we already got a question queued up before I even started stream. So the current question comes from Elisa Wonderland. And it's an all too common question, but all too misrepresented at the same time. So it's like, why does angst about things from childhood stick around as long as it does, and how do we move past it? So I feel like if humanity knew the answer to this question, like every problem would be solved. And I don't mean that like psychologists haven't figured this out. I mean more so in the sense that like not enough people have figured this out. And whenever we distill this information, it tends to be kind of either watered down, incorrect, or not universally applicable to everyone. Like there's a lot of like, okay, how do I do that? Sort of sentiment attached to it. So I'm gonna try and do my best and explain kind of the science of how like because this is really a trauma question. Like I know we use the word trauma a lot in society, and sometimes it's valid, sometimes it's kind of not. But I'm gonna do my best to explain it as someone who is not entirely qualified, but definitely not somewhat qualified. So basically, this seems to be like a trauma based question. Oh, by the way, just a disclaimer: if anyone has any actual like mental health needs, please go get therapy or contact like a medical provider or something like that. I am not. You should not be taking this as like advice or anything like that. But I just like to offer my perspective, and maybe it can be helpful, maybe it won't be. But like, take everything I say with a grain of salt, and definitely don't take it as like medical advice or concrete mental health advice or anything like that. Um, but anyways, so once again, why does angst about things from childhood stick around as long as it does, and how do we move past it? Great question. So we're gonna basically talk about the how trauma works, because that's essentially what angst from childhood is. So trauma, as a very loose definition, is like anything that that affects anything. Let me rephrase that. From the past that influences the way we tackle life's problems. And trauma is generally, because in order to differentiate it from like learning, it's generally negative. um And so this is kind of why the term trauma gets thrown around as much as it does. Like everyone's like, oh, everyone has trauma nowadays. People don't have trauma. Like your trauma's being in the war. But like that's like I get the sentiment, but like by like definition, that's like kind of everyone does have trauma. That's kind of like actually like true. Whether or not you move past it in a healthy way is another thing. But generally, everyone has trauma. And so this is kind of like a well-known thing. Why did I write trauma? I'm dumb. Um, like immediately take away all my credibility. Um, it's because I was spelling it out as I was saying it. That's why. But essentially, what trauma is basically like any event that like drastically influences your brain's response to certain stimuli. So like just to give you like a basic example of like what a piece of trauma is, let's take like getting bullied for example. So like an example that I really like about like trauma from getting bullied is like okay, so let's say that like let's say like as someone was about to come over to me on the playground and bullied me, like they like looked at me a specific way, like they had these certain eyes about them, and it's like, and that was kind of, and then because that was followed by getting beat up, my like not mine, a brain would kind of learn like, oh, when that stimuli happens, aka when someone looks at me, that's dangerous. And so this will manifest in a lot of ways, and like one of them will be like they'll be afraid to have eye contact, because like if you ever struggled with eye contact in social situations, it might be because like when people looked at you, this sounds like so like this sounds so like therapy, like it's just like, oh, it's because of your childhood, but like legitimately, like the odds are that like someone like when they made eye contact with you, it was followed then by like negative punishment, either that from like parents or school kids or whatever. um and so it's basically rewiring your brain in a way that's like, okay, when this stimulus happens, we're gonna respond, sorry, we're gonna respond like this. And um and that makes sense, right? Like the thing we don't understand is that trauma is typically like logical. Like your brain is not working against you. Like it may feel like it's working against you because it causes you problems in the present, but like trauma was not born out of like a desire to screw up your life. As much as it may feel like that at times, it's like that's not what's happening here. Um and so essentially, I'm trying to think of how to say this. Um, so like, when because I'm now afraid of eye contact, because I used to get like beat up whenever I saw someone making eye contact with me, like you think about like whether or not it's advantageous to now avoid eye contact. It's like it's very logical actually. Like we always think of trauma as like, oh no, I want to get rid of my trauma. The problem is, and take this with a huge grain of salt, is that a lot of trauma makes sense in such a way that like sometimes getting rid of trauma dependent on your situation is not actually like an optimal thing to do. So like a lot of people will be like, they'll be like in an abusive household, for instance, and then let me collect my thoughts for a second. So like someone will be in an abusive household, and then they'll be like, how do I stop having anxiety when my family member comes home like intoxicated? And like the sad reality is I'm not saying this for everyone who's in that situation and stuff. I'm just saying like sometimes I would, in my personal opinion, it's not always inherently a bad thing to have the anxiety, because we think of like negative emotions like, oh, we should get rid of them. Like I don't think that for all negative emotions, I don't think they equal like bad. all the time. Like, because that's you can see that in this question, kind of like, how do we move past it? And I do think there's a difference between like moving past it and getting rid of the negative emotions. I actually think a lot of moving past things has to do with accepting the negative emotions. But like, I feel like a big part of moving past trauma is understanding like, why does it exist? And this is like the mechanism. This is like, why did I say it like that? Mechanism. Like, why this is like the mechanism of how therapy works when you think about it. So like, generally, when we have trauma in the past, like, so like, let's say like our life is just like white circles, and that these are like experiences, and like we'll consider like the whiteness like purity, like goodness. And so like, let's say like one event gets tainted a little bit and there's like this evil dark aura in it, that will then I'll do it in the second one so it makes more sense. That will then keep carrying over to like the next time and stuff. And and the thing is when we try, and then like we wake up here and we're like, why is there a and we're like, why is there such negative emotion attached to this? That doesn't make sense. And like that valid, like, why do I, why is it so hard for me to make eye contact with people? Like, makes sense that you'd be thinking that if you can't think of that. And that's like why therapists ask all these generic questions that people get angry at, because like they're valid questions, because it's like, okay, they're just trying to figure out where like this evil dark energy came from within you. And so they're gonna be like, like, what was your childhood like? Were you ever bullied and stuff? They're searching for where that energy came from, because whenever you have situations like that, it reactivates that emotional energy due to the stimuli. So like, I don't need to be afraid of eye contact if no one's trying to make eye contact with me, or there's no situation that invokes that. I only get the anxiety when my brain sees that we're in the situation where I need to make eye contact. And so the trauma typically will only activate when there's a situation that applies. Unfortunately, some people get trauma that it applies to their entire life, and in that case, that's rough. That's when you really need a good counselor. And so, um, and so basically that's just how trauma works. Like that's why stuff sticks with us very long. So it's like, why does angst about things from childhood stick around as long as it does? Because we have that thought a lot, right? We're like, oh, I should be over this by now. Like I shouldn't be complaining about like things that happened when I was a kid. I should be over it by now. Like I should get rid of that thought, because that's the past. But like a very important thing is just to acknowledge that like the past affects the present, because our brains adapted to take negative events very seriously. Regardless of how serious your adult mind perceives it in the present, like it doesn't matter. It's the brain realizing that like that was important. So like, let's say that like we had a parent that like we needed to avoid, and so we needed that anxiety signal to be like, get me out of here. I gotta leave. I gotta go away. And like that protected you for a time. And like the important thing is that like, if you ask the kid like, do you want me to get rid of the anxiety, they'd probably say yes. But like, if you went into like an alternate dimension where they didn't have that anxiety, like it could have saved their life that they had the anxiety. Like, negative emotions are adaptive. They're like, there's a purpose to every emotion that we can possibly feel. And so anxiety helps us by avoiding danger. And so if you grew up in a childhood situation where you had to avoid a lot of danger, I'm not surprised that you have a lot of anxiety in the present. So to summarize kind of where we're at right now, trauma is just like when something bad happens to us from our childhood, our brain learns, okay, so when thing A happens, thing B will, like, bad thing will happen. And so whenever thing A happens, we need to have this negative emotion to protect us from what's about to happen. So like, if I see like a bear, I want to run from the bear. You wouldn't be like, oh, how do I get rid of like my fear of bears? Like, I think it's a good thing to be afraid of bears, personally. I think that's very good. Oh, thank you, Mortal, for following. Thank you. And but essentially, so where was I going with that? So like, our brain learns like, oh, when I see bear, I should be afraid of the bear. And then there's so many people who are like, why am I afraid of bears? It's like, it's a good thing you're afraid of bears. It's a good thing you're afraid of intoxicated parents, because at some point it probably kept you alive. Like like you should be afraid of bullies, like that sort of thing. Now where this has some nuance is that like there's adaptive, where like an emotion will come up, and like it's good that you're feeling the negative emotion because it helps you avoid danger. The only problem here is that we have something called maladaptive. Um so maladaptive is kind of like when you learn something and then it was effective for then and it's like no longer effective now. So like an example of this is like if I'm afraid to make eye contact with someone because I got bullied whenever people looked at me, then if I got bullied because of that, then how do I put this? Sorry, my brain's going at like a million miles an hour, so I'm just trying to collect my thoughts real quick. Like when like it could have been good for me to recognize that eye contact is bad back then, because then I stay away from bullies and I don't mess with them. But like nowadays, like when I'm trying to go on a date or something like that, like it's not good for me to be afraid of eye contact, because now it sends the signal that I'm not interested in the person, or that I'm like really shy. And some people are like put off by that, like and like I'm not making a judgment on that. I'm just saying that like frankly more people are attracted to like confidence. But essentially, like that anxiety signal for eye contact worked back then, but like now it doesn't. And so it was adaptive, now it is maladaptive. And this is why a lot of people like Lisa will wonder, like, how do I move past this stuff? Because that to me speaks to someone who is like, I have all these signals from my childhood and all this trauma and everything like that, and it keeps activating whenever the appropriate circumstance pops up. And that like makes sense, obviously, like that. And oh, my pen, like that makes sense. But now it's like, okay, now I know that the response in my head is not proportionate to what I'm in the situation of. A la, like I see a bully, I should be scared. Now I'm on a date, I shouldn't be scared when I'm on a date. Like, it's a date. It's going to just hinder me more than it helps me. That's a big thing to think about. Does it hinder my life more than it helps me? Because that's how we define mental disorders, is like, how much does this hinder your daily functioning? So like, and that has a very broad concept of functioning. It's really like, what do we consider normal for a society? So there are like problematic implications of that potentially. But I think that it's good to have that sort of model. But we essentially have to wonder, like, and you guys are probably like good at this stuff. Like, does my trauma typically help me more or hurt me more? More people are like, it hurts me more. If you're still in a bad situation, I would argue that sometimes it is helpful. But as weird as that sounds, it's like, no, it's good that you have anxiety. It's like, yeah, it's good that you have anxiety because it helped you like not like get like assaulted because like you were afraid of going down dark alleyways because you've been assaulted in a dark alleyway before. Like that sort of thing. Like that's good. Like that, I'm glad that you're scared so you avoid the danger. But you guys can make your own judgments on whether or not that's kind of weird for me to say. And so essentially to kind of catch people up for anyone who's in chat, we were talking about trauma. Trauma is like anything that like creates negative energy because we see a cause and effect of the universe. Like, if this thing happens, then this will happen, and that's bad. So we need to protect ourselves by having anxiety or something and avoiding the situation. And like, that makes sense. Like, we want to avoid the anxiety and stuff, but trauma is not like the implication of good or bad. Like, trauma can be good, weirdly. In the sense that like sometimes it gives us an appropriate emotional response, so that way we avoid certain stimuli. And so like that's just kind of basically how trauma works. Like if I like like if I used to like if bullies used to hit me with a baseball bat, then whenever I see a baseball bat, I'm gonna get scared of the baseball bat. But like that's helpful for when bullies are carrying around baseball bats. Not quite as helpful for when I'm on a professional baseball team, and then I'm kind of like Lisa, and I'm like, how do I move? How do I move past this like all this childhood stuff? Like I know that it's inappropriately activating. And so that's the important so that's why I'm bringing this up. So the most important thing to understand is that just to recognize like, oh, this is my brain trying to protect me because it logically knows through this. Logic doesn't mean correct. It just means that there is a logic to it. Like logically my brain knows, oh, it sees this thing. I got to avoid that thing because then it's going to hurt. And so like either emotionally or physically. And when this becomes maladaptive, is when like it is now no longer protecting you. It's now creating more problems and like resistance of functioning within your daily life. And that's when we kind of need to focus on how to move past things. And so let's think about this. So like we talked about why does angst from childhood stick around as long as it does. A big part of that is that the like bad emotions, like negative emotions, we're just going to call them bad. Like bad emotions lead to learning. So the biggest reinforcer you can have for a behavior is negative emotion. That's kind of sad, honestly. But like you think about why this is good. Like these things sound bad. Like why do we why think about how happy we would be if we learned from all of the successful times we did something rather than learning that, oh, I'm a loser because I failed this many times. Like, but think about how adaptive this is from like a survival standpoint. So like if I get my arm bitten off by like a tiger and then I have like all this positive energy within me that I'm like, oh no, it's okay that I got my arm bitten off by a tiger. Like that's fine. I don't need to feel bad emotions. That person is so much more likely to go get their arm bitten off by a tiger again because like they didn't care enough about the first time. So like, that's your choice. You can do that. I don't care, but like, I do care, but like, I mean, I have no power over you, but like, that's why our brains adapted, because the people who learned more from negative experiences, like getting their arm bitten off by a tiger, those are the people that survived. Those are the people, like from a Darwinian standpoint, lived longer than the others. So yeah, I think, like, forgive me. Once again, I'm just a student. And so, I could be getting the sections wrong. I did not look up any research beforehand, so I could be totally wrong. I'm pretty sure, like, the amygdala is right next to the hippocampus, which means that, like, the fear center of our brain, the thing that produces stress and cortisol, is right next to it's, like, connected to the part of our brain, the hippocampus, which is responsible for, like, learning and, like, understanding the world around it. And so that it basically translates to like bad emotions are what's going to make you learn. Like, like you're going to learn the hard way. Like that's kind of how life treated it. And once again, it's so important to not resent this part of your brain. Like it's not a bug, it's a feature. Understand that like learning from negative experiences more than positive experiences is actually generally adaptive. Once again, there's nuances to this. If there are many cases, there's way too many cases to count where this becomes maladaptive because this is the thing, your brain thinks that survival is way more important than happiness. And like that makes sense because like if we prioritized happiness over survival, like way back in the day, the odds are that like we wouldn't have like survived this long. Like we might not be a species still. So it's important that our brains did that. And so our brains are still equipped to like keep survival. And that might even seem logical to some people, but you have to understand that like even that is like a social construct. Like it's a social construct for us to value happiness over survival. And so if you're like, come on, brain, catch up, it's like, sorry, that's the only reason you're alive right now. Like, that's the only reason we're a species, is because like I prioritize survival over your like your happiness or whatever. Okay. So essentially, our brain learns from negative emotions more than positive emotions. This is why trauma sticks with us for so long, because your brain, for survival purposes, learned through negative experiences and clung onto those experiences so it can reference them later in appropriate situations to protect you. So, it's way more important for me to remember like that bears can eat me than it is for me to remember that like I like Lucky Charms. Like, that's so much more important for me, at least in my opinion. And so it's like, why does my brain hold on to trauma? It's like, it's a simple answer. It's trying to protect you. Like, it learned that, oh, okay, when I give you this signal, you're safer. And it accurately learned that. It may make you miserable in the present, but like that doesn't change the fact that like that is the fundamental purpose of emotion. Um and so yeah, like this sort of stuff can be adaptive. And so it's like, oh, do I have to like the fact that my brain like tells me that I like suck all the time? And it's like, no, but like I don't I'm asking you to simply not like I'm asking you to simply like understand when it's happening, that you kind of look at it and go like, "Oh, okay. I see what you're doing." Now, it might be hard for you to do that when it's beating you up and you're kind of like, you kind of have to just be like, "No, no, it's okay. I understand why you're ruining my life right now, because it's logical. It's logical that you're ruining my life, because it's okay, you stupid, dumb idiot, that you think that this stimuli is similar to something that is way in the past and it's from my childhood." Like it's so hard to accept negative emotions, because like it's way easier said than done, because it's like, oh no, just accept your negative emotions. But it's way easier to do that when we're not acknowledging that like they're ruining our lives actively. Like, it's actively having a negative effect. Like, if I could get rid of this negative emotion in the present right now, I could be doing so much better on this date, and I wouldn't have to be bogged down by my social anxiety. It's so hard to accept your emotions. But acceptance does not mean that you're like telling it that it's right. That's internalization. Like, just acceptance is just understanding that like, yeah, it's happening. Like, I'm not going to try and create a world where this isn't happening, because like it's just happening right now. And like I can try and move in a direction in the future, or right now I can try and start using the power I have right now to like carve a future where I'm not affected by this. But right now, this version of me is affected by the negative emotions, and there's nothing I can do about that. Like, even if you get better in a second, it's not going to stop current, like this version of you in this very moment. It's not going to protect you from pain. You can only protect future yous from pain. And so that's really important to understand. So like, yeah, angst sits around from your childhood because like you may hate it because it may ruin your life in the present, but like odds are that your brain learned that it was the right call for like survival's sake at some point in your life. Like, there's probably a point in your life where you would have been hurt a lot more if you didn't feel the negative emotions that you're currently resenting. And so, yeah, like that. So basically, your brain is like, hey, I know that this is a very unpleasant experience for you, but like, if this makes sense, like the unpleasantness of emotions is not like a bug, it's a feature. Like, think about how much like anxiety would get us to act if it was a pleasant emotion. Like, the reason negative emotions are such strong influences of action is obviously because our main motivator is to get rid of the negative emotion, because it's unpleasant to feel a negative emotion. So this stuff might sound very, very basic. I don't know how much sense I'm making here. But like, bad emotions exist because they help us survive. And without them, we probably would have died. Your brain, for better or for worse, learns throughout your childhood what is going to protect you and what's not going to protect you. And so over time, if you had like a really bad childhood, it's going to encourage the negative signals in your brain because it needs more negative signals to survive, because it invokes behavior in you. Like, if it invokes anxiety in you, you're going to stay in your room a lot more. And yeah, that's going to be miserable, but you'll be a lot safer because like the brain understands that like you can be miserable all you want, but it just cares that you're safe. It's like a parent who is like, who's like, I don't care that you're mad that you're missing the concert. I care that you don't like get murdered on the way to the concert, or you don't get in a car accident or something like that. Like, your brain is like an overprotective helicopter parent in the sense that like sometimes they're right, but other times they kind of control your life, and you can kind of recognize like, okay, like I'm a big boy, I'm a big girl, like I can go out on my own. You don't have to protect me anymore. And then that kind of leads to, similar to a parent and child relationship, this sort of like resentment that builds up and then is kind of like leave me alone. Like I don't need you in my life anymore. And so that kind of brings us to like, how do we move past it? Like, finally, after like 30 minutes, we're at like the second part of this question. But I just feel like it's so much more deep than we think it is. But essentially, it's like, how do we move past it? It's like the first part of that is like just accepting and understanding why your emotions do what they do. And if your answer to like, why does your emotions act like this? If your answer is something like, 'cause they hate me, then like, I don't know a non-insensitive way to say this, but like if you think that your emotions are out to get you and they are purely out for like a masochistic hatred of you and that they have no function, they have no positive function to them, then like you fundamentally misunderstand the mind, in my opinion. Like, the mind is not stupid. The mind adapts to whatever it thinks is optimal. And like, you can disagree with how optimal it is, but like, everyone's mind generally works the same when it comes to trauma. Like, everyone's mind generally, like, when a negative event happens, it's gonna keep that around until it fully accepts that you don't need it anymore. And like, think about it this way. Think about like being in a debate with someone. Like, think about how much more likely you are to accept their point of view if like they start off asking you like, okay, I understand that you have this point of view. Let me just make sure I'm understanding you correctly. So you think that, so like this factor is this. And so you're like, okay, so this equals this. And then if you could say, yeah, that's exactly what I believe, how much more likely are you to be receptive to what they have to say next? Probably a lot more receptive. So like, that just makes sense. Like, I don't know how else to say that. Like, it makes sense that your brain, when you fundamentally misconstrue what it's saying, like, your brain is over here being like, hey, like, I really want to protect you. And it seems like every time someone came up to you with a baseball bat, that like you got hurt. And so I really want to make sure that like you stay away from it. So I'm going to tell you, like, I'm going to get you to fear the baseball bat so that way I can protect you. Is that good? And then like you come being like, no, I don't want you to do that. I want you to leave me alone because baseball bats are not bad and you're stupid for thinking that they're bad. And it's like, okay, but if I never told you that they were bad, you would have continued to get beat up by baseball bats. And then you're like, well, it's better than what I'm going through now, okay? It's better than this existence, if you could even call it that. And like, I'm doing a different voice, but like genuinely, like I understand that hatred. Like I've gone through that sort of personal hatred towards my own emotions where I'm like, how can my mind be so stupid? Like, how can it just be that dumb? And so like, it makes sense to resent our emotions, but really what you want to do is search for an explanation of your emotions. And I highly recommend therapy. If therapy doesn't really work for you, then I would suggest a different therapist, because therapists are like fit is very important for therapy. Like they've done studies on like what is actually like the most effective method of therapy, and we've kind of found out that like they're all kind of the same, and like they all get generally the same outcomes. The thing that actually matters is like your fit with your therapist. So like even if you like your therapist, like you might just not vibe with their theoretical orientation, like the way that they chose to do therapy based on like the theories of the mind and their methodologies, and like vice versa. You might like the way someone's therapy works, but you might not just like jive with the person, if that makes sense. So like in that sort of case, you want to not be around them. Like you would want to ideally try and find a therapist that like both you like the way that they do therapy and you feel very comfortable around them. And then if problems arise from there, I would tell your therapist that like you're still having problems, and like you're like, hey, you can literally just tell your therapist. I cannot tell you how valuable this is. Just tell your therapist like, hey, I don't think this is working for me. Like that's super important. And so basically like the way that we do this is through self-exploration, which is the point of therapy. Like that's why they ask you like tell me about your childhood and all that sort of stuff. So therapy is a super good way to get some assistance. Plus they'll be able to see problems that you might not be able to see, because like I'm going to be a therapist, but like I still take benefit in getting a therapist, because like it's no matter how much knowledge I have and no matter how much I introspect, there are going to be some problems that will probably be more easily detected by someone purely by virtue that they're like not me, and they don't have a colored view of like how my mind works, and like they don't have any judgments attached to things, so they might be able to see problems in a more clear manner than me. And so essentially like how do I put this? So yeah, like you need to introspect and figure out like, okay, when I remove all bias from my mind, when I'm not like hating everything about my emotions and being like, stop it, negative emotions, I hate you, die. Like when I'm not in that sort of mindset, ask yourself like, okay, if I'm in a clear sense of mind, what benefit does the anxiety bring to me? Like, what benefit does depression bring to me? Like, things that you literally consider to have zero benefit whatsoever. Really think about what benefit it brings to you, because I guarantee you, regardless of if you can see one, there is a reason for every single negative emotion you have ever felt in your entire life. Regardless of if it's adaptive or maladaptive, like, negative emotions are not bugs, they're features. They have purposes. It's not like the goal of life is not to eliminate negative emotions. Negative emotions help us. They are good. And so they're the only time they're bad is when they're maladaptive, because the brain is sometimes like it's a little slow. It sometimes doesn't understand that like our primitive wiring isn't always the best thing, and it's really slow to like change its perspective on certain things. And so really, really dig deep in your past and figure out like, okay, what is the benefit of having anxiety? Oh, okay. Like, I guess when I was a kid, I got bullied a lot, and so I kept a lot more to myself. So I guess it protected me, because even though I didn't like being by myself, it sure did lead to me being beat up a lot less. And so like, that like, just give it some amount of benefit of the doubt. You don't have to forgive it or anything like that. Like, you don't have to tell it like, oh no, it's okay that you ruined my entire life. You don't have to say that. Just like get where it's coming from, and then like try to not judge it as good or bad. Just like simply acknowledge that like it had an effect on you, and it was this. And it's like, oh, I get it. The reason my brain's always acting haywire is because like it keeps sensing this thing, and it thinks that there's danger. But like, I know that there's not anymore, but I can get why a brain would do that to protect me. And I would get why it kind of has trouble differentiating between when there's real danger and when there's not real danger. Because think about it, your brain always wants to like assume the worst of any given situation. And so it always wants to kind of think to itself like, no, the worst possible thing is happening right now. Because think about how good that is. Like, once again, like who do you think survived more back in the day, back when we were all cavemen? People who were really pessimistic and thought that there were way more tigers out there than there actually were, or people who are like, you know what? I'm a little hungry. I'm gonna go out, even though there's probably a lot of tigers out there. Probably the people who are more pessimistic. Probably those people. They probably lived more. Um, and so like that's the I cannot describe to you how huge it is to simply non-judgmentally, or at least to attempt to non-judgmentally, like view as much of the emotion as you can without like giving it backlash and just saying like, okay, I get it. Like I don't have to I like very much agree to disagree with your mind. Kind of say like, okay, I don't agree with the way you're applying this emotion right now, but like I get why it's setting off alarm bells, because it's very similar to this instance. And that's like why you should explore your past. That's why you should really, like, with a therapist, deep dive into your past, as cheesy and cliche and hard as it might be. I genuinely think that that's why therapy is very helpful for trauma. Therapy is like extremely helpful for that. If you want, you can try meditating, go for walks, and like see what emotions come up when you don't have headphones in and you don't have any form of stimulation, and then like see what emotions come up and be like, oh, where's that emotion from? And more likely than not, you can trace it back. Like a really helpful way to think about this is like have an emotion, like have like a really negative emotion, and think like, when is the earliest time I can remember feeling that emotion? And that's like a very therapy-esque way to get to the root of trauma. Um, and like, by the way, this is kind of what people call mindfulness, is just simply being aware and acknowledging the existence of emotions without feeling the need to like do anything to them. And the beautiful thing is, and now this is very dangerous information, but if you have awareness, it will help it go away. Like it will help reduce the power. Like, and we have evidence of this. And the problem with that is that now, if you're listening and you really want to get rid of trauma, then you're probably going to be like, no, I'm going to be aware of this without actually trying to get rid of it. And then your subconscious mind is going to be like thinking it's so sneaky, being like, hey, now it's going to think that I'm not judging it. And so it will get rid of it because I hate it secretly. But it doesn't know that. It's like, here's the thing. You can't trick your mind. Like, you just like can't. Your brain is your brain. You can't get the brain to trick itself. Like, I can't hold up a number of fingers behind my back right now and fool myself into thinking that it's a different number of fingers than I'm actually holding up, because like I can't trick my own mind. It's either I know stuff or I don't. So you have to learn how to genuinely have some sort of self-compassion, and that comes through just understanding the mind and understanding like, oh, okay, this had a purpose to it. It's really screwing up my life right now, but it did have a purpose, and I guess that's fair. I guess that's fair. It sucks that it really sucks that I have to deal with the consequence right now, but like, it's fair that that happened to me. It's fair that it has a concern, we'll call it, that this is going to mess things up. And so, yeah. So look at that thought. And the reason that this is important here, I'm gonna actually highlight real quick. I'm gonna highlight why awareness is so powerful. Awareness. So awareness is very powerful because like, think about this. Like, why is something a habit? Like literally, like, why is something a habit? Something's a habit because it's unconscious. And so like, we think of habits as like a way to like do like positive things, right? Like, it's like, we can use, like, if I can get in the habit of going to the gym every day, then that's great, because then it's all unconscious. I don't have to think about going to the gym. There's no debate about going to the gym. But like, here's the thing, is that we can have mental habits. So like, the brain can like see a picture of like a really muscular person and then think to itself like, oh, like, I'm ugly. Like, that's like a mental habit, like something like that. And so think about all the times in your brain where like it feels like the thought is like so automatic. And so that is also connected by the unconscious. So like and so like you're basically like, how do I get rid of uncontrollably thinking about certain things? Like that's like what the question is. Like, how do we move past trauma? And it's like the reason that your mind feels so uncontrollable right now is because you don't have active awareness over it. And so like we think about habits and it's like, why like if I consciously think, okay, now I need to go brush my teeth, is that really a habit? Like, is that really a habit? Not really, right? Like, it's not really a habit. Like, and so because it's not really a habit, because like a habit is, we classify that as when it's unconscious, you might think to yourself, like, yeah, I know I have depression. I know I have anxiety. I have awareness over it. It's like, do you? Do you really though? Like, do you like you need to be in the mindset that when an anxiety comes up, like if you see a baseball bat and you get anxious over it, it is not enough to be like, oh, okay, look, I'm anxious. Be like, I'm anxious because back when I was a kid, I saw that there were baseball bats, and then I got beat up, and so my brain is having a very normal, habitual reaction to this stimuli right now. Like that is how clinical you got to be with this sort of stuff. That's a lie. You can be a little unclinical with it and just be like, oh look, it's my anxiety. It's just that like some people do that and it doesn't help enough. And so what you need to do is cut this off by mindfulness. And I know that like people teach mindfulness wrong all the time, and so it has like a really bad rep. It's like seen as like this like weird thing that people do where it's like, oh yeah, just positive energy. You got to be mindful. You got to be in the present. That's not what mindfulness is. Mindfulness actually has like literally nothing to do with positivity whatsoever. Like I don't know where people got that assumption. Mindfulness is just simply understanding that like your emotions have purpose and catch them when they come up. Like you don't even have to do anything about it. Like if you're on a date and they're looking at you and you're scared to look at them, be like, literally all you have to do to diminish its power over time. It's not going to work immediately most of the time, depending on how strong it is. Sometimes it's going to take weeks to get this solved. But the way you can slowly chip away at the power of the mind, and this is proven by science, we have scientific evidence of this, is that you just need to notice the fear or the depression or whatever. Just notice whatever habits or thought loops your mind is in. Notice when they come up and then dissect them as they come up. Like, don't appraise them. Be like, is this anxiety right? Am I really ugly? Just understand, like, when's the first time you felt ugly? Who told you that you were ugly? What is the benefit of feeling ugly? What is the benefit of fearing baseball bats? What is the benefit of fearing a bear? And then understand, like, oh, okay, it thinks it's providing that benefit right now. And then don't tell it, oh, you're stupid, brain. You're stupid. That's not what's happening right now. All I want you to do, and it sucks because I wish I could give you a magic pill that just like eliminates it on the first try, but that's just not how the brain works. Literally, like, if you actually care about making sustainable change in the way that your brain works, we're always taught that problems need to be fixed with some sort of like immediate action that we can measure. Like we're always taught that like, okay, go work out and then you'll know that you worked out by if you're sore or not. This thing is not going to have significant results for a intensely traumatized person for a long time. Like it's going to take a while. And you're not going to notice the benefit immediately. And so you're going to immediately be like, oh no, well, this is pointless because I don't see the benefit. And so your brain's going to be very demotivated. And then watch that. Like, anxiety, the biggest down player for real. Explain what you mean by that, because I'm all over the place. So I honestly can't even follow my own mindset. But like, essentially, like, what you need to do is shoot, what was I talking about? No, this is what it's like having ADHD. You literally, like, the reason I can ramble for so long is because if I don't ramble, I'm gonna forget about the thought immediately. But like, okay, what is it? Like you were saying, how you have to address the root cause, like the well, yeah, like that's what I mean. Is that like your brain will try and like watch what your brain does when you try and deep dive into the root of something. Like watch what happens when you try and like really dive back into it. Your brain is going to come up with so many things that like it's going to give you like look at how many ways your brain tries to stop you from deep diving into your emotions. It's going to be like, this is a waste of time. Oh, what are you going to deep dive into? The fact that you're stupid? Ugh. Like it's got so many ways to stop you. And now here's the important thing. Let's think about mindfulness in this sense. Let's think about this in that sense. Okay. Let's get super meta right now. What's the benefit of not deep diving into your emotions? What's the benefit of not deep diving into your emotions? It's that it protects you from the hurt of deep diving into your emotions. Like we don't think about this way. We don't think about like the super meta ways in like, that's what I mean. Think about that, Patrick. Why is it a benefit for you to say it is what it is? Why is that a benefit? Because it protects you from the hurt. And why does that do? How successful are people on average who say it is what it is? Typically, they are very controlled by their emotions. Because here's the thing. I'm about to drop some truth on everyone right now. I'm about to drop some hardcore truth, and everyone's gonna be naysayers. Watch it. Everyone's gonna be naysayers. I'm gonna venture to be based right now. Your emotions do not give a shit about whether or not you bottle them up or not. They will always affect you. Because here's the thing. Your brain scientifically always has, let's see here. Like, we think of this as how it works, right? So like, this is your brain. Pretend these two things are your brains. We think that like, oh, I've got all these emotions coming in on my brain and everything like that. And now I can put up a shield around my brain to stop. You don't have two brains. You're misunderstanding. You're fundamentally misunderstanding this exercise. You're fundamentally misunderstanding it. So we think that we can have a shield to protect about all this stuff, so it'll like keep out everything. That's not how this works. That's not at all how this works. Actually, shut up, Patrick. I don't care that it looks like genitals. That's fine. Anyways, so essentially, like, your brain, I'm gonna hit you with a truth bomb right now. Your brain cannot your brain cannot ever how do I say this? I don't want to misconstrue. So your brain will never be able to eliminate or protect you from emotions. It can kind of protect you, but like essentially this I'm gonna say this. When you say, fuck it, we ball, or when you say it is what it is, you are not protecting your mind from acting on the emotions. You are simply becoming numb to them. And think about becoming numb to something. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that like you're no longer like, think about it this way. If my arm is numb and it gets set on fire, I'm still on fire. Like, that doesn't mean that I'm not on fire anymore. And so, in that sense, when we become numb to emotions, they don't no longer affect us. They actually we just become blind to them. And think about how much that messes up people in life. When you willingly surrender control and you say, you know what? Emotions are too much of a burden. I'm going to give up on this whole emotion thing. And I'm essentially just going to, I refuse to feel emotions because I think it's much more efficient for me to protect myself from the emotions. But the emotions are still there. They still objectively affect the way your mind works and how it makes decisions. All you're doing is putting on the blindfold and saying, la, 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 I don't see you, emotions, la, 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 la. But you're still gonna obey them, is the thing. Like, everyone who says, all of the Ben Shapiro types out there who are all actually, I'm very factual. I'm not emotional at all. I'm very factual. Objectively incorrect. The biggest myth that we have as a society is that there are logical people and there are emotional people. All that exists are people who are blind to their emotions and people who are very in tune with their emotions. Like, there is no such thing from a neuroscience perspective. There is no such thing as like a logical decision maker. Like, there just isn't. Like, your brain, if you use an EEG, if you scan the electrical waves of your brain and figure out which dopamine centers are being activated, how much cortisol is being produced, how much it's being received, and all this type of stuff, like, that is all equally active 24/7, 365 between any two people. Like, dude, you, no matter what, your brain is always affected by emotions. And you will always make decisions in accordance with it. This is why people, you guys have no idea how important this is. Like, this is why people in life are like, oh, why can't I just my behavior makes no sense. Like, I want to do something and then I don't do it. Like, why do you think that is? It's because you've spent your whole life saying it is what it is, which is basically giving a big middle finger to all your emotions. And guess what? Like I said, you're not in control of what you do. You're not in control of what you do. Your emotions are in control. What? No, don't worry. I'm just saying this for everyone. I'm not specifically targeting you. Like, I'm not saying that you need help. I'm saying, like, this sort of, like, meme is actually what so many people believe in, and I need them to know this. Yes, okay, good. Just making sure. I didn't want you to think that. Like, so basically, like, people who say it is what it is and fuck it, we ball, like, those are people who are so not in tune with their emotions, which are the drivers of all of our behavior, by the way. Emotions control all of our behavior, and then they have the audacity to come up to me and be like, oh, why can't I get my brain to do what I want it to do? I don't even get why my stupid idiot brain doesn't listen to me. I don't get why it doesn't do this, please. Like, it's because you purposefully put on a blindfold and then you're like, oh, I don't get it. What's happening? Why can't I see anything? It's like, you put on the blindfold. Like, I don't get it. Like, I get it because society wants us to believe that there are logical people and there are unlogical people. Like, otherwise, a lot of political people wouldn't have an argument if they couldn't just call everyone emotional. Yeah, I'll say it. But, like, literally, like, your emotions are always affected. Like, your emotions always affect your decision making. And so you can never, no matter how mathematical someone seems, everyone's emotion-based. It's just how much you want to accept that you're emotion-based. The only true way to get control over your mind is to cut off all of your mental habits through mindfulness. And how do you become mindful? By becoming a quote-unquote emotional person, aka understanding, dissecting, and feeling all of your emotions when they come up and just trying to get an understanding for them. Because until you can form an argument against the emotion, until you can be like, oh, I see, brain. See, you were worried about the baseball bat because we got beat up with baseball bats. But you see, like, is that why you're scared? Only when you can actually identify why that part of your brain exists, which takes a lot of introspection a lot of the time. Like the only way that you can get control over the mental habit is if the brain knows that you understand it. Because think about it. Like, how good would the brain be if, like, you were like, If the brain was like, yes, we should be scared of tigers. And then you were just like, we shouldn't be scared of tigers. Lucky Charms exists. And it's like, that doesn't make sense. Like, those arguments don't correlate. And so, like, how logical would the brain be if it just gave up all control? It's like, well, the argument didn't apply at all to the reason that I believe this, but we should just give it anyway. No, your brain is only going to respond when it knows that you understand it. It's not going to work if you just keep bashing your head against the wall, being like, do what I want, do what I want, do what I want. Like, that's not going to work. You need to truly understand why your emotions exist, where the roots of your trauma are, and then from there, then all these mental habits that you're not in control of, all these thoughts like, oh, I'm stupid, I'm ugly, all these negative emotions, you'll be able to understand where do those come from and how do those compare to the current situation. And do I need to acknowledge not acknowledge, that's a bad way to put it. Like, do I need to give into them anymore? Like, is it a good idea to still be scared of this stuff? Because acknowledge that the negative emotions were logical in the past, then truly determine whether or not you actually believe that they're advantageous now. And purely, you don't even need to change the mental habits. Just use this technique to gain awareness of these mental habits and stop your mental habits from controlling what you do automatically. Stop this pathway from the mental habits coming from the unconscious and add mindfulness to the mix. So that way you completely cut this off. Now you can have mental habits and it doesn't affect your behavior unconsciously. Now you have full conscious authority. And so think about it. Once again, this all comes back to it. If I go brush my teeth, but I had to think about it first, it is no longer a habit, objectively. Objectively, habits in the mind are automatic. That's what makes it a habit. That's like what our understanding of habits are, is that it is only born out of unconscious behavior. And so the moment we gain awareness of it, it is impossible to do something habitually. And so everyone's like, oh, I don't like mindfulness. I don't like all that hippy dippy stuff. And then they're also like, I don't get it. I keep having all these mental habits, like get self-deprecating, and then it leads to me not doing anything with my life. And I don't get how to fix that. And I'm just like, you fix it with mindfulness. You fix it with it. Like, literally, this is what mindfulness is. It is this is how you add control to your life. Because so much of our life is uncontrollable, because we go through life and we have automatic thought patterns and we're like, oh, guess I got the I hate myself RNG today. Guess I got the depressed thing today. And so then we just like, oh, that's just life. Can't do anything about it. I have no control over my life. And then it's like, oh, I could you see, it's okay that I ate 5 brownies today, even though I said I was going to go on a diet, because, I'm not in control of my hunger. I'm just not in control of it. It's not something I can control. I can't control once a thought comes to my brain. What I do with it isn't my responsibility. I just have to give in to my thoughts. Once again, these mental habits leading to unconscious behavior, because you don't want to take the time to dissect them. And then I tell them hey, actually, the way you actually stop a habit from being a habit is to consciously focus on it. Once you consciously focus on something, you cannot, and it moves from the unconscious to the conscious, it objectively doesn't have the power of habit anymore. Whether it's positive or negative, habits are no longer habits, positive or negative, once you look at them. Once you understand them, once you see them as they're happening, oh, it's my habit right now that I'm going to brush my teeth. That moment on, it's up to my conscious brain to do it. And so in this same way, if you ever feel like your thoughts are out of control, like your trauma is out of control, like any of that stuff is out of control, what I need you to do is I need you to understand the fundamental principle. Negative emotions are not bad. They're bad in the sense that they're supposed to be unpleasant, but there is a purpose to every bad emotion you've ever had. All your self-loathing, depression, anxiety, any of that stuff, it has an adaptive quality to it that helped the human race survive back when we were cave people. And so through understanding that, look at it with a different lens. Don't just see it as this negative force in your life. Look at it and think to yourself, okay, what can I do about it now? What is that protecting me from? Because you have to acknowledge that it has positive intent. And so look at it with that lens and say, okay, you have positive intent. What's the positive intent? Let's figure this out. Let's figure out why. Let's figure out in your crazy mind, in your alternate reality, how this depression is quote unquote helping me. Like, and then you kind of deep down into it. It's like, oh, when I was a kid, I was told that I was never going to amount to anything. And so my brain kind of realized that like spending energy is a waste. And so that's why my mind doesn't give me energy anymore, because it doesn't want me to waste it, because when we waste energy, that's just a waste of our time. So we might as well spend time conserving energy. That's kind of what depression is. It is a compulsive conserving of energy. Which is why it never lets you use energy. So it never gives you energy to spend. It's like, what do you do? Depression is not blocking the overhead 10 times in a row. Like depression is like depression basically saw at some point, it's like, hey, spending money is bad. So you don't have, so we're going to keep all your money in a savings account. And I don't care if you starve. I'd rather you starve than not spend money. And like, that's logical to the brain. Cause it's like, okay, I don't want, at least you'll be alive theoretically, like, but you won't be spending energy. And that will be better. And so like, even if it's really hard to comprehend, like how could this emotion that's ruined my life ever benefit me in any way, shape or form? Like, you need to understand that it does genuinely come from a benevolent place. It comes from a place that actually does want to help you out. And then from there, go back in your past, figure out where that depression, anxiety, all that sort of stuff, figure out where it comes from. Like what was the canon event that happened to you that caused you to have these emotions? And then from there, whenever that instinct comes up, whenever that mental habit comes up, don't just give into it, because then that reinforces the behaviors that go along with it, which are typically negative. And then just look at it and say, oh, that's an interesting negative thought. And then don't fall into the indulgence where you're like, oh, well, it's right, though, because I'm stupid and I'm ugly and all this sort of stuff. Like, you might fall into that. That might be a byproduct of this process, but that's like, it's important that it doesn't discourage you from doing it. Look at it, understand it from a clinical perspective and be like, oh, okay, that's the emotion that tried to protect me from blah, blah, blah. And then just see it. And if it doesn't change the behavior and you still give into it, fine. But all that matters is that you saw it. And then tomorrow, see it again. And then keep seeing it every single time it comes up. Maintain full awareness of every time you get a strong emotion. Ideally, any emotion, but let's just start with strong. Anytime you get a strong negative emotion, understand what the roots of that are, what it's trying to do in a benevolent sense. And then over time, you will diminish its power. And through the diminishing of its power, you will not only stop your mind from having so many thought loops and mental patterns of your brain just bombarding you, even though you're not doing anything, your brain just keeps bombarding you with, oh, you're stupid. Oh, you're ugly. Oh, I hate you. You're dumb. No one's ever going to love you. It's going to change all of that and diminish its power over time. And then that in turn will give you more control over what you do, because you won't have all these, like, you'll never block the overhead. Think about that. Like, you'll never block the overhead. Like, all that sort of shit. Like, you really need to see that. And then, like I said, your emotions will always dictate your behavior. And so people go through their whole life and they wonder, why does all my behavior feel like I'm not in control of it? And like, why do I, like, they have these two factors. Why do mental habits and unconscious, and why do I have so many mental habits? Like, why do my thoughts feel uncontrollable and unrelenting? And then unconscious behavior? Like, why do I feel like I have no control over how I spend my time? Why do I feel like I always give in to the emotions, even though I've tried so hard in my life to suppress my emotions? to get rid of my emotions. Like, and the answer to that is that you're not paying attention to them. Like you don't understand your emotions and you don't see them when they come up. So through understanding and awareness, I promise you, anyone out there listening who feels like their mind constantly bombards them with negative emotions and that they can't control what they do, your emotions are always the boss. They're always dictating everything. The most control you can possibly get is to look at them, to diminish their power of habit, so that way they can't be a habit anymore, and then understand them to decrease the intensity. Because once you reflect their argument back to them perfectly, and they're like, oh, yeah, that is exactly what my thought process is. And then you continue to say, okay, I completely understand your thought process. And based on the information I have now, I actually think that that's not the right way to go. It's going to have so much harder of a time controlling your behavior. And so it will allow you to act independent. Not only will it decrease the amount of negative thoughts you have in a day, but it will also allow you to act independently of the thoughts. Okay. I feel pretty good about this. I'm going to probably stop stream and then immediately realize that I forgot to mention like 85 aspects of this. So yeah. I feel good about it. I hope that answers your question, Lisa. If any of y'all ever have you stop with the overhead. Like they're if any of y'all have any questions, I'm gonna put my my Discord in I'm gonna put my Discord in chat. You guys can message me with a Discord message that is asking that, like, you guys can ask me all the questions you want and maybe I'll answer them during the stream. I don't know why I wouldn't, probably if it just violates TOS. But I will try to get to all of the questions and then yeah. So no, that's the thing. That's the thing, Voltaic Astra, is that like is that I use like video game references, like even with people that I'm actively helping with like mental health stuff, I actively use so many gaming references, and like I feel like I sound so ridiculous every time, but like every time I'm like, no, this is helpful. Like I hate how effective this actually is. I hate how effective the metaphors are for people who actually like understand the metaphors. Because like I basically just try and find a thing that I basically just try and find a this is my Discord for anyone in chat that does not know it. Oh my goodness, I couldn't put it in chat. All right. I'm going to put it right here. That way it'll be in the video at least. It is DYPHINOIDE. Okay, cool. Anyways, so I love that like yeah, like that's what I love using like especially when I explain spiritual concepts, which, oh boy, we'll get into those someday. I've been very sciencey lately, but I actually think that spirituality represents a lot of this stuff way better. And for those of you that sets alarm bells off in, don't worry. Spirituality is not religion. It's not faith-based. It is purely like ancient people being like, hey, I think this is how the mind works. And the more we like use science to figure out how the mind works, the more we kind of realize that they were kind of right about everything. They just said it in a way that Americans didn't like, and so we decided that it was all BS. But no, I completely agree with a lot of spiritual concepts. But even when I'm describing spiritual concepts, I like use gaming metaphors. I'm like, okay, so they discovered that like this sort of mind is like a DPS, and like this sort of mind is like a tank, and like all these sort of metaphors. It's great. No, we'll get to it eventually because I also love using gaming metaphors in like psychology stuff. Like that's what I mean. Well, you know what? Maybe in the upcoming streams we'll bring that up specifically so we can have an excuse to talk more about DPS minds and stuff like that. We can find out what type of mind you are because it's like a personality test sort of thing almost. But yeah, all right. Well, thank you everyone for dropping by. Got a lot more viewers than normal this time. I'm glad. Now that I'm back from vacation, I said before I went on vacation that I'm going to start streaming more once I'm back from vacation. I'm back from vacation. I'm basically going to stream all the time now. I'm looking to do at minimum 5 times a week. Hopefully more than that. But I've got a ton of ideas planned for things we're going to talk about. If you guys have friends that are interested in psychology or anything like that, I'm looking for people to come on the stream. Like I want people to like talk to, and like whether or not they want to like trauma dump to me like I'm their therapist. Keep in mind, this is not therapy. I'm not going to be their therapist, but I will like give you the insight of a therapist without giving you therapy sort of thing. But if you want to come on and trauma dump, or you just want to be as simple as being just like, bro, I can never stay motivated. Just like, how do I stay motivated? Like things like that. Like I can, yes, exactly. Like we should, like seriously, if you guys have any friends, like, or if you guys yourselves want to come on, like, just message me. Find some way to message me, whether it's Discord, whether it's whatever. Like, just message me or get your friends to go on stream, and then I'll get on Discord call, and then we'll have like calls where I kind of do this whiteboard thing, but we like talk about it together. Because I'm down for anything, even if you want to get super heavy and be like, when I was 5 years old, my parents forced me to eat dog food. Or if you just want to be like, bro, why do I rage so much at League of Legends? League of Legends, what is wrong with League of Legends players? And I'll just sit here and be like, okay, do you genuinely want to know what's wrong with League of Legends players? Because we can talk about what's wrong with League of Legends. Literally, I have a stream plan. I want to talk scientifically, like break down psychologically and scientifically what is the most effective way to practice Super Smash Brothers. Like these are the ideas that I have. So like if y'all have friends that want to come on and either trauma dump to me or just have a conversation about like psychology, and they can ask me questions or you can ask me questions or whatever like that, please, like that's what I'm looking to do. I'm looking to get participants. So let me know, message me on Discord. And yeah, like I think we're good. But if y'all have any questions you want for an AMA like sort of format like this, also message me with questions. Message me if you want to come on the stream, and then also message me if you want to and then also just tell people about the stream because I obviously want more viewers, even though that's very generic. Like and subscribe, everybody. Anyways, thank you all for joining the stream. I'll see you guys probably tomorrow because I stream all the time now. But hope to see you guys a lot more soon. And